Hello and welcome to the Amazing Studios Production Podcast. I'm Cliff Baumgartner.
And I'm Peter Scheibner.
How you doing, Peter?
I'm doing all right. Cliff.
Yes.
You want to take my survey?
That was fast.
Yeah.
Wow, wasting no time today. Here we go.
I got no time to waste. No, this is an important survey, and it's 2 questions.
Let's do it.
You can take your time.
Okay.
You know, spill it off on YouTube. But question number 1.
Okay.
If your life, and this is your life,
Yes.
were made into a movie,
Yes.
what genre would it be?
Okay.
And it can be like, it can be a hybrid, like,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be action or comedy. It could be an action comedy.
Okay.
So think about that. We'll come back to this.
Is there another part to this, or is that it?
That's the first question. There's 2
That's
questions.
the first question. Oh,
Yeah.
there's 2. Okay.
Yeah. Well, once you have an answer to the first question, we'll get to the second
Can you start me off? Tell me what yours is.
My life would be an adventure comedy.
Oh, okay.
Yes, think like Get Smart.
Okay.
Kind of almost a buddy comedy maybe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that would be my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be thinking on that then.
All right, fantastic.
Let's go ahead and hop this week into what we've been watching, because I think we have some exciting stuff.
Yeah, I've been watching a little bit of Edgar Wright. Sat down and watched Hot Fuzz for the first time.
I love that movie.
It was really surprisingly good.
It's great.
Okay, so I say surprisingly good. I had actually pretty high expectations walking in, but those high expectations were still blown away.
Yeah.
And blown away is a surprisingly good term, actually, for that film.
He loves to dip into the absurd. And man, at the end of that movie,
yes,
he really, really does.
Yes, and every time I was like, aha, that's what's happening. I quickly had my hand slapped.
Did you see the twist coming at all?
Not at all.
Good.
Nope. The thing is, I knew there was a twist coming, and I thought, I know what the twist is because I'm a filmmaker and I'm so dang smart.
Yeah.
And then they came to that twist, and you found out, oh, that was actually just a red herring of a twist.
Yeah.
And the real twist is, boom.
Yeah, that's the brilliance of that movie, is that you're following. For anyone who doesn't know, it kind of has a crime thriller, comedy crime thriller sort of vibe to it, and you experience those red herrings the same way Simon Pegg does all throughout that film, and that it builds really beautifully.
His close-ups, Edgar Wright's close-ups,
Yes.
are incredible.
Yes.
I have never seen an editor, because I'm going to call that's an editing thing, be able to take 6 close-ups, bang, 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 and tell a complete story without showing a single wide.
Right.
It's like for instance, I think to the police chase, when they chase the guy who's speeding and they pull him over. The whole thing is done in close-up. It's 45, siren, wheel turn, siren again, pull over, they're out of the car.
Yep.
Sir, you're speeding.
It's beautifully done.
It's just, and it's.
Well, there's a great Every Frame a Painting episode that we've watched a couple of times here about Edgar Wright and his visual comedy, and the sequence of the montage in Hot Fuzz when he's traveling out to the country town is brilliant.
Yeah, it's a designed montage.
Yes.
You think to your typical American comedies, that would have been, some big aerial shots of the girl as she drives into the city, and probably just a B unit going to go get it. And on top of all that, you're going to have your titles just kind of put in the bottom right-hand corner.
Right.
There's no design or art to it. But yeah, that opening sequence, it told the story of going from the London cab to a London train, transferring onto a country train, onto a country cab.
Yep.
And doesn't without actually explicitly saying any of that.
Yep, and you slowly see his cell phone signal dwindling down. And it's great.
As the world around him, the high fancy lights of London start to fade into the dull lanterns of this small town.
And there's also lots of setup for little things like the miniature village that you don't realize that's going to have a payoff at all until the very end of the movie.
Yep.
And
the church.
Like yep, the church.
They actually, in that opening sequence, I think they show you every location that a dead person's found at.
Yeah, they also, and also when he first walks into the town, and there's that long tracking shot, which, I don't know if you knew this, Peter Jackson is hiding in that shot.
Really?
He is the guy... He's walking through frame eating something, I think.
Well, that's kind of a typical thing.
Yeah, that's a very Peter Jackson move. But I think it's in that shot they show almost every character in the film in one shot.
Yeah.
And one continuous. It's just genius. That whole movie is just brilliant.
Yeah, and book ended perfectly. You know,
Yes.
it ends where it began, but now with this progression,
Yeah.
brilliantly done.
I love Edgar Wright, and that movie's great.
Yep.
I have been watching recently a show that I have watched. God, I don't even know how many times. It is all on Netflix, or most of it is on Netflix, and I've probably watched every available season 4 times, and that is Archer from FX.
You know, I've heard you mention that before.
I adore that show. It has become comfort food. It's one of those shows where if I'm doing something else, or I just kind of want something on, I don't want to think about it too much. I've seen every episode to the point that I know every joke, I know every setup, every punchline. So I'll just throw it on and it's there in the background. And the amazing thing is, it still makes me laugh like it's the first time I watched it. It's such a smart show. It's so tight. The guys Adam Reed, the creator of that show, used to do a show on Cartoon Network called Frisky Dingo, which is a bizarre romp. If you've never watched Frisky Dingo, it is strange. There were 11-minute episodes. I can't even begin to describe the plot. And I think they got fired from Cartoon Network after 2 seasons of Frisky Dingo for being drunk in the office too often. And then he went on to create Archer because he loves spy shows. And the word is that he was in a bar and there was a beautiful woman there, and he wanted to create a character who could go up to her and have perfect confidence and woo her immediately. And that became Archer. Archer, of course, is voiced by H. John Benjamin, who is so fantastic. And his voice alone, do you know H. John Benjamin and his work? You would love his voice. He doesn't look like his voice one bit, but just every time he speaks, it's just so funny and so tight. And he is the main character in the show, so it makes it just wonderful. The writing is genius, and all the voice actors are at the top of their game. It's really just a phenomenal show on every level, and it's something that I always come back to. It's something I quote endlessly. And it's great to have those shows. I love having those shows and movies and things that are comfort food, that are that thing you could always turn to, and you know it's always going to entertain you, it's going to make you happy, it's going to make you feel great. I think that's a really cool thing about entertainment in general, and especially film. And Archer always makes me think about that. So that's pretty cool. This week, we're going to do something kind of fun. We're going to be talking about a subject that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I love to read, and I also love films. And I, for one, enjoy it quite a bit when a filmmaker tackles a book adaptation. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people, it scares them to death because they think they're going to ruin something. But I think there have been a lot of wonderful book-to-film adaptations done, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
And the truth is, I mean, it's one of the hardest, most daunting things to undertake as a filmmaker.
Absolutely.
Because you can do so much more in literature than you can do in film.
Right.
Film, you're constrained by many things, but chief of which is time.
Yeah.
You can't stretch a movie out as long as you can stretch a book out. I think of The Count of Monte Cristo, which is my favorite novel ever. It's 1,000 pages in its unabridged form. You can't get all of that into 3 movies, let alone 1.
Right.
And so this is a daunting task for filmmakers to undertake, and so we want to spend some time talking about those who have done it well.
Yes, because actually some of the most famous films in American history are adaptations. The Godfather.
Yeah.
One of the most legendary adaptations for sure. So there's a lot to be said, even as people tend to get kind of scared when it comes up. There's a lot to be said for adaptations.
Yep.
So why don't you kick us off with one of your favorites?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to early 2000s. This is the first film I ever got super excited about, and it really did pay off well, and that was Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Absolutely.
Yep. I remember actually finding out about the production in 1998 before they'd signed on with New Line. I was an avid reader of the novels. I had a sight impediment when I was a child, and I didn't realize I did, because for me, I saw double. And I didn't realize that wasn't normal until I was 10.
Wow.
And so I struggled reading until I was 10 when I got, what they did was I got glasses and I had to put a patch over one of my eyes. And when I put this patch on, all of a sudden I could read. And so I remember I went from reading Dr. Seuss. The first book I ever read alone was Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who. It took me a week to get through it. The very next book I picked up was The Hobbit.
It's a great place to start.
Yep, took me a month to read it, and I reread it immediately as soon as I finished it, and then I read it again, and then I was told there's more books in this series, and I got my mother went out and bought me hardbacks of all 3 Lord of the Rings books. And I read them. It took me forever because I'm still. I mean, at this point, even though I'm 10 or 11, my reading level is that of like a 7 or 8 year old, because I just haven't had the practice. But my maturity level is such that I'm thirsting for this grand epic adventure that is the Lord of the Rings. And I remember being completely engulfed in this world and. Looking up to see, is there a movie? I found there was an animated film they did that went through like half the 2 towers. At the same time I was looking all that up, I found out that Peter Jackson was undertaking The Lord of the Rings and that he was looking to make 2 movies. I was like, oh, this is awesome. We're going to get 2 movies out of this. And then went to New Line, ended up getting produced, made 3, shot them all at the same time. And I got to go to the theaters to watch it about a week after they came out, and I was entranced, like everybody else was at the time, and we hadn't seen anything like that. That level, that marriage of CG and practical effects and just the great storytelling. But ultimately what it came down to was his faithfulness in those original films to the books. He had to cut some beloved characters. He had to cut some beloved scenes. He had to cut some really tough stuff. But what he did was he stuck to the meat and to the heart of the story. And I think that's a key to any good film adaptation is you gotta be respectful to your source material.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, I think, where people kind of get in arms sometimes is when you see a filmmaker who doesn't stay faithful to the source. Right. He did add some stuff, but it was stuff that was necessary to make it work for film.
Yeah, I am still surprised at how well he pulled off cutting Tom Bombadil. Because that is something, if you're a fan of the books, that is quintessential Lord of the Rings.
It is.
And to not be in the films was a very gutsy move. I saw the film. Fellowship is one of the first films I remember being truly captivated by. The
Mines of Moria was the first time I was ever like,
oh man,
I forgot it was a movie.
Yeah, I mean, the first time you see the Balrog running down through the gauntlet in the mines coming at the Fellowship, it's just one of those. It's one of those moments you never forget, and it's still Lord of the Rings are still those films that if I walk through the house and it's on the TV, I'm going to sit and watch for a while
because it's a while.
Yeah, that, and it's just so captivating you can't pull away.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books movie adaptations is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Millennium trilogy of novels. One of my favorite book series.
Do you own those?
I do.
Can you bring those into work
Absolutely.
tomorrow? I need to do it. I need to sit down. I need to read them because I've seen Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah. Stieg Larsson was a really special talent, and it's such a shame that he died so young before ever seeing what his books would go on to be. But he was a crusading journalist himself in Sweden for many, many years, and he drew from his experiences to write those books. And in Elizabeth Salander, he created a character who he dubbed, I believe it was if Pippi Longstockings were alive today. And that was what he wanted to create, was this outlandish, big, wild character who you at once loved, but were also kind of terrified by. And the way she comes off on the page is just incredible, and the way the story unfolds, and the way, one of my pet peeves about series, and this is true of movies, books, what have you, is I hate when the sequel is basically just like, hey, remember that thing that happened in the first one? It's happening again for no real reason. That drives me crazy. He actually built his story so beautifully that the second book, it reminds me kind of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. Empire is by far the better film. The second book is actually even better than the first. The second book's one of my favorite novels of all time. And you realize that all of the meat of this story was that the first book was just set up for that. And then, of course, it was made into a Swedish film. But I want to talk about the American film, the David Fincher film. It's also one of the first. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is one of the first films I remember watching. I was into film at the time, but I wasn't thinking like a director back in those days. And I remember watching Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in the theater, not really knowing anything about it, not really caring at the time who David Fincher was, and sitting down and watching that film and being so aware of the brilliance of that entire production, that entire film, just the way it's orchestrated. Very similar to Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of the story that is changed. The entire ending is different than in the original book. So a lot of Fincher and Zillion, I believe it's David Zillion who wrote the screenplay. They played around with it a lot, but they, again, like you said, they didn't lose track of the main story and told a really dark but in the strangest way hopeful tale. And I think that's one of the greatest things about that entire story is that Stieg Larsson will take you to some dark, dark places in those books, but they always end with some sort of, well, almost always, no spoilers, almost always end with some sort of hope. And I felt the movie kind of captured that in a very interesting way. So I love that film, and that is always, for me, when I think about adaptations, I go first to Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah, so I love. I'm just as a director, as a DP, the visual sense of that and the solidarity in which it fits within itself.
Yeah.
There's never a point in the film you feel like you're out of the world that the film has created. And that's hard to do with dark films like that because that's so far from most people's experiences.
It's also a film that I didn't realize until I got the Blu-ray and I started watching all the special features and stuff. It's actually a very visual effects heavy film. Mm-hmm. There is, probably at least one or two VFX shots per scene in that movie, and you would never know.
Yep.
It's some of the best use of visual effects I've ever seen in that film.
Well, really, a lot of the reason is they did a really good job in the production at prepping it. Like when they would have an explosion, they wouldn't just plan on doing all of that in post. Right. They went ahead and had practical lights that they can use to flash the scene.
But one of my favorite shots in the entire film is completely a visual effects shot done in post. It is the close-up of Elizabeth's gun against the fire down near her leg when I believe she uncocks the gun next to her leg, and it's this amazing shot, completely done in post. They shot her on a green screen, matched the flames, did it all in post. It was not a principal shot, and it ended up being, to me, one of the best shots in the film.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
All right, so you've had time to think about my question. My question again was, if your life were made into a film, what genre would it be?
What genre would it be? I'm going to have to go with dramatic comedy.
A dramatic comedy?
Yes.
Okay.
So something along the veins of like a Little Miss Sunshine sort of.
I can see that.
Story. Yeah, I think that works.
So almost like an indie dramatic comedy?
Yeah, something like that.
All right, fantastic. Question number 2.
Okay.
This could be any actor, living or dead.
Yes.
Who would play you?
Well, there's a cop-out answer to that question, right?
You can't say Daniel Day-Lewis
I know.
just because...
Just for the people listening, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, male, female, what have you. Daniel Day-Lewis is always an acceptable answer to that question.
Yeah, no,
because he can play anything.
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis is an acceptable answer, but no. Okay. This needs to be somebody who, in their current canon of work, could capture you. And
also, how much should I factor in the look?
That shouldn't be a non-consideration. For instance, for me...
That's a wonderful double negative.
Yes. For me, the actor who'd play me is Steve Carell. First off, I think he gets my mannerisms. I think he can do that. But he also, it's some level of physical resemblance. It doesn't have to be a perfect match, but it's some physical level. Okay,
let me think about it during your next adaptation, and I'll give you an answer.
Wonderful. My next adaptation is The Hunger Games.
It's a good one.
And I'm actually going to go specifically to the first one. At the point of recording this, you can be watching this at any point in time because it's out on the interwebs, and that happens. The third one has not, or the fourth one has not been released.
I believe it was Stephen Colbert who said it's the rare fourth entry in a trilogy.
Yeah, the rare fourth entry in a trilogy, which is now becoming much more common.
Yes.
Because people figured out you split your sequel, you split the last one to 2, you make twice as much money.
Thanks, Harry Potter.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. At any rate, I'm just gonna talk about the first one because in my estimation, it was the best.
Yeah.
And it was the best because it was just so darn beautiful. It was so simple. I mean, it had the the benefit of not having a huge budget. It wasn't burdened with budget, which is something that we understand well as filmmakers here. The
no
burden,
kidding.
the lack of burden of budget.
Yeah.
But it had a certain raw and grounded feel to it that matched the book so well. Now, I'd read the books a couple years previously to watching it for the first time, and it's one of those. It's a page turner. I mean, you're going to pick it up and you won't be able to put it down till you're done. It's also not.
My dad actually got hooked on. He picked up the second book. It was in a hotel lobby. You know, where they have like books you can read. He picked up one of those books and started reading it, and he hates reading. He really does. He think he was from a different. He was stuck out of time or something, but he hates reading, and he read like 5 chapters in one sitting. I mean, that's how fast those books read. He didn't even know what was going on, and it still grabbed him. I mean, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, and the truth is, I mean, the Hunger Games is somewhat of a ripoff of Battle Royale. It's not the most original concept out there.
I would say that's true of the first one.
Yes,
it really
the
goes
concept.
off
Honestly,
track.
the story itself is unique. The concept of a dystopian world where children are forced to fight. To pay tribute. That's Battle Royale.
Right.
So the setting is Battle Royale, but the world itself and the detail in which she paints her characters, some of the things that really made that film though stand out as an adaptation. Jennifer Lawrence, I think, is the first thing you have to say. Her portrayal of Katniss Everdeen, and they got her at the perfect time in her career before she was too big to do what really I think would be considered a teen adaptation. Even though
she lends it credibility in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, and the Hunger Games does something that very few films in that genre can do, and it has crossover appeal. The Twilight films were wildly successful, but they were only wildly successful with teenage girls and their moms. You look at the demographics on who watched those, and that's why those films made $220 million, which is a ton of money. Don't get me wrong, that's a ton of money.
I'd take that.
But the Hunger Games got that same female audience, but it also got all their boyfriends and their husbands. And those films made $400 million. There's a lot of money, and then there's, oh my word, that's a ton of money.
Yeah.
And those films made a ton of money.
Well, it became a respected franchise. I wouldn't say that Twilight is necessarily a respected franchise at this point.
No, my wife had that on the other night just to laugh at, and it's hard not to. The acting is pretty horrendous. So Jennifer Lawrence is the first thing. The second is the cinematography. I know it got knocked a lot for its shaky cam and its constant handheld.
I appreciated that.
I really did too, because it gave it this dystopian future poverty feel, and it matched the world, and it matched what I had in my head from the books. And that's a great example of taking this rough style of writing that Collins put into the books and matching it to your cinematography and letting that kind of bleed over, so that there was this difference between the Capitol, where everything was smooth and it had almost more of a Fincher feel, and it just this kind of omniscient camera, and then the districts, which were much more just honestly in rougher shape. And so rougher camera work went with it, and they carried that through all the films.
I would have to disagree with you on one thing, though. I still feel that Catching Fire is the best of them.
Catching Fire was fantastic, and honestly, I haven't seen one yet that I disliked.
Right, I'm with you on that. The first one, there's 2 moments in the first one, and I actually have a connection to those films, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But as much as I love the first one, a lot of people gave it crap, but I really enjoyed it. But the Josh Hutcherson's character?
PETA,
thank you. The name just completely escaped me for a second. PETA with the face paint, like camouflaging himself into a rock, which I know that's taken from the book, but my word, it was dumb in the movie. And then the logic that they applied to their action scenes in the first one, I didn't feel was as strong, where you literally have trained killers going after someone and they get stopped because she goes up a tree. The kind of logic that they applied in their action scenes in the first one, it felt, and I mean, Gary Ross, I believe, Gary Ross directed the first one, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't think he has a ton of like super action experience. He has great character experience, and I feel like that's what he did beautifully in that film, were the characters. But then when it was handed off, and the new director's name escapes me, but the gentleman who did Catching Fire, and he's doing both parts of Mockingjay, Catching Fire took my breath away.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Catching Fire, I'd say technically was a better film.
Yeah.
But the originality of what was the first one, and honestly pushing the bounds, because Catching Fire has built on what they did in that first one. That's
Oh yeah,
that's what I appreciate.
Gary
about that.
Ross established the world, no doubt about it, and they've been playing in his sandbox
Ever since.
and it's great.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe I've told you this in the past, but our audience hasn't heard. I was actually in the first Hunger Games.
Yes.
Yes, I was an extra. That film, if you don't know, was shot in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Back when we had the film credits.
Back when we had the film credits, their principal studio was set up in an abandoned or in an old Philip Morris cigarette factory in Concord, North Carolina. And
Old furniture town.
Yes, absolutely. And they also shot up near Boone for a lot of the trees and forests and where the cornucopia is and all that kind of stuff.
Another old furniture town.
Most places in North Carolina are an old
Especially
furniture town.
part of North Carolina.
Yeah, no kidding. But so I heard that they were shooting, and I ended up applying to be an extra, and I got on set for a day for the District 11 riots. I was one of the people with our. We were actually the first. This is kind of neat. We were the first group to do the three-finger salute. So every time you see the three-finger salute on the commercials, on the advertisements, I remember being on set. We were starting to do the three-finger salute, and somebody turned to one of the producers and said, "You know what? I don't think we've talked about how we should actually do it. Has anybody seen how Jennifer Lawrence did it?" And they go, no, we don't know it. And they actually on set figured out how we were supposed to do it, and that has carried through all the films. And I remember watching that conversation, which was really weird. But the weirdest thing about that was there was buzz around the set that there was a big director. We were second unit. It was not Gary Ross. He was in downtown Charlotte that day shooting, I believe, the theater scenes when she's being interviewed and all that. Big, huge, like 400 extras on that scene. It was a massive production. But we were B unit, and they kept saying, "Oh, there's a big director, but you don't really recognize directors unless it's Steven Spielberg. Like it's hard to tell. And also the way that set was being run, the director wasn't calling action. It's such a big set. The assistant director was calling action, working with people. The director was mainly hanging out behind the camera, watching stuff. And they would occasionally go, "Hey, Steve, what do you think of this?" So I was like, "It's Steve. I don't know who Steve is." 2 weeks later, comes out in Variety, Steven Soderbergh in Charlotte for 2 days working on the Hunger Games. It was Steven Soderbergh. And of course they had his picture there, and I went, "Oh yeah, it's Steve.
Oh yeah,
it's that
Steve.
guy."
I love that guy.
Yeah, so for an entire day I was being directed by the director of Ocean's 11 and Contagion and Magic Mike and so on and so forth, and had no idea. And I felt really dumb.
Yeah, you missed an opportunity
I
there.
did.
You could be his, buddy pal video manager guy, and here you are sitting with me.
Yeah, but instead I'm here, so I made the noble choice. I don't know.
Yeah, you're a sucker. All right.
Yeah, so what's
Before
your
we
next?
launch into the last one, because the next one's yours,
Oh, you're right.
I need an answer. Who would play you?
I'm going to go with one I feel like is both the age is fairly close-ish, and the look I think would work is Aaron Paul.
Oh, I can see that.
I really love Aaron Paul's work on Breaking Bad.
Think he can clean up the B word a little bit? Because
yeah,
you don't use that nearly as
No,
much.
I don't. I don't use it nearly as much as he does. But I've seen him in some interviews and seen him out of that character a little bit. And he seems like a really good dude, and he's a great actor. And I can't wait to see what doors have opened for him since Breaking Bad and what he really does. I know he did like Need for Speed and some stuff like that to kind of get out of that hardcore narrative world, but it's gonna be interesting to see where he lands. But yeah, I would think Aaron Paul.
Usually most people are trying to break into that hardcore narrative world.
I know.
There's Aaron Paul trying to get out of it.
I think he was delivering pizza or something when he got the job on Breaking Bad.
That's true. Before that, he was on The Price is Right.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You ever seen that?
Yeah, and then he was supposed to die at the end of season 1, and
Yep.
they liked him too much.
Yeah.
What a good problem to have.
That is a good problem. That's my goal, is to get on a TV show, and I'm only supposed to be in like one episode, but they like me so much they decide to keep me alive and make me a regular. That's my whole strategy for my career.
Frankly, that's the only reason you're still alive here.
Yeah.
We liked you too much. We were going to kill you, but we decided not to.
Just don't kill off my character in the studio.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you dodged a bullet for now. We'll have to see.
I'm going to dodge a bullet in the next episode. We're gonna write that in.
The Matrix.
Yes.
So my last adaptation is a comic book, one of the most legendary comics out there, made into a controversial, but so overall fairly successful film, Watchmen.
Oh, that was Zack Snyder, right?
Zack Snyder, also shot by Larry Fong, who I've talked about and talked to before. He's a really good guy, actually a magician. And back in the day, I wrote for a magic magazine, and I interviewed Larry and got to talk to him about Watchmen, and it was a really cool experience. He's a genius with a camera. But Watchmen, I mean, for starters, it is a legendary comic. It came out in the era of what some people refer to as the British invasion of comics. And Alan Moore wrote this big, weird, dystopian kind of story about these retired superheroes. And it was just, nobody had ever seen anything like it before. And when you read that book, it still feels special. You know, there's some films you watch, some books you read that just having it in your hands and looking at it, you feel the importance. Watchmen felt that way for me when I first read it. And Zack Snyder went on to decide he wanted to try and make it into a feature film, and that was not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. It's a 12-part comic. It's huge. It's a very big, weird story that has a lot of stuff that I don't even think you could do on film. So he had to rewrite the story. He rewrote the entire ending. I am of the camp, for anyone who's wondering, I prefer the ending of the movie to the ending of the book. I thought the ending of the book was completely absurd, as much as I love the book, and I love the way they handled it with Dr. Manhattan in the movie. But one of the most fascinating things about Watchmen from a cinematic standpoint is how so many shots in the film are literally pulled straight out of the comics. The one that first comes to mind is at the beginning of the film when Rorschach grapples up the side of the building when the comedian he finds the comedian dead. And he grapples up the side of the building to try and get into the apartment. And he comes up, and there's crime scene tape all over the window. And he comes up onto the edge of the window, and the crime scene tape breaks, and he's kind of squatting in the window, and he's backlit. That shot is directly from the comic. And when you put the comic next to the film, it's unbelievable what they did and how close they got it. And those moments are all throughout the film. The Watchmen, maybe more than any other film, now comic book movies are the craze. Maybe more than any of them, Watchmen feels like you're watching a comic book. It's really incredible what they did visually in that film, and to have as much story as they did to tell, having to condense it, having to cut some stuff out. I ultimately think they did a really, really good job, and it's a dynamic, weird, bizarre film that matches the tone and intensity of the original book, and it's a great adaptation, I feel like.
Yeah. I gotta ask though, which version are you talking about? Because I'm looking here on IMDb. There's 3 cuts.
Yeah.
One that's 162 minutes, which is a long movie.
Yeah.
That's the original. One that's 186 minutes, which is Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson level. Mm-hmm. And then, wait for it, a 215-minute ultimate cut.
Yeah, I believe the ultimate cut has the animated comic Tales of the Black Freighter included, which if you're a fan of the book at all, you'll remember Tales of the Black Freighter and having to read that at the start of several issues, and it's a very bizarre romp. But Tales of the Black Freighter is a comic within the comic, and it tells part of the story. It sets up the ultimate ending of the book. And they ended up not doing it in the movie, but they did an animated version, and I believe the ultimate cut has that included.
Yeah.
Which makes for a very long watch.
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailers for it, and I mean, it definitely captures this comic book world probably better than anything else I've ever seen. And Zack Snyder, I think, is probably one of the best graphic novel filmmakers of all time, and you even see it in his more recent work in Superman films and whatnot. He definitely knows how to capture a frame of a comic book into a film and make you feel like you've just connected something.
And there's a moment in the opening title sequence of Watchmen that is in my top 5 cinematic moments of all time, and that is it's showing the kind of the hippie movement. And a hippie this woman walks towards a soldier who has a rifle pointed at her, and she puts a flower in the barrel of his rifle, and as the camera moves onto the gun, it just fires and shoots through the flower, and you don't see where that bullet lands, but they just hold in that moment. And I've always thought that was a genius moment of film. Love that part.
That's awesome.
So I think a good way for us to wrap up and end this is by talking briefly, we've talked about it before on a past episode, but to talk briefly about an adaptation that is about to come out that we are both very excited for.
Yeah, that would have to be The Martian.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I read that book actually at the beginning of this year was completely riveted. I remember telling everyone around me, this has to be a movie. This needs to be a movie. A month later, it comes out, Ridley Scott is making it. And I've been pumped ever since then, and they are crushing it with their online presence right now.
Yeah, I mean the trailers. First off, from Trailer Craft, they're a study that you should watch because they've done a phenomenal job with their trailers.
Yeah.
It's just enough of revealing what it's about without giving anything away.
Yep.
And they've done a really good job at putting out social pieces, little 10, 15-second trailers that are just visual sense that give you an idea of why you should want to see it.
Did you see it's almost felt like an Under Armour ad about Mark Watney that they did? That was really smart.
Yeah.
That's some meta marketing stuff that was genius.
Yeah. No, I mean, they've done a phenomenal job with their marketing so far. I mean, honestly, the visuals look stunning. It feels a little un-Ridley Scott, honestly. It doesn't have that same Ridley Scott feel. I don't know, I guess I've become accustomed to. It doesn't feel like Alien. It doesn't feel like Gladiator. It doesn't feel like a Ridley Scott film that I've seen before, which excites me a little bit.
I don't know. I saw a couple of there's been some stills coming out of the Hab, their habitat on Mars, and it reminds me of everyone waking up on the Nostromus at the beginning of Alien.
Yep.
And everyone feeling like interstellar truckers and having their little totems and all these kind of things. It feels very similar to the Hab in The Martian, where you see their desks that have their little totems from home and their little objects and all this kind of stuff. It reminded me, I could see a link between those two films there.
Well, I'm excited to see it and see how much of that comes through.
Yeah.
It's one of those books that was, I think, made to be a movie. You read it and you think, wow, this would make a really good movie. But at the same time, there's all your traditional pitfalls that an adaptation that can fall into, that it can easily fall into, which is not paying enough respect to the original text, but also not transforming it enough to make it a movie.
That's the biggest challenge this one faces, because the book is 90% log entries. It's all Mark Watney writing into his Mars mission log about what's happening, and they've translated that. The way I heard it described by someone on the production, I don't remember if it was the DP or one of the producers, was that they essentially, the idea is that there are like GoPros all over the Hab in every place so that they can film their experiments and send stuff back to NASA. And that's how they're doing his entries, is that not necessarily in a found footage way, but a lot of that kind of dialogue.
Almost like an Avatar?
Yeah, kind of like an Avatar.
This is my video log today.
Right.
We did this and this.
Exactly.
This.
And kind of coming through and using that for those pieces, because that was a huge part of the book. That was how you got to know Mark Watney's personality, which is really what carries that book, was through his logs. So it's cool to see that they found a way to do that well on film, and I hope it translates, because that could be great.
Very smart, very well done. We're excited, and you can find out more about The Martian online, but it's definitely one we're going to be getting our advance tickets to here very shortly.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And we'll be standing in line.
Yes, it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot of good fun. So I'm very excited. But as always, you can if you want to hear more about us, in addition to following The Martian online, you can follow us online. Amazing Studios can be found all over the internet. Our website is amazingstudiosinc.com. Our Twitter is Amazing Studios 1. We're also on Instagram, Facebook. You can just look for Amazing Studios. And Peter, I believe you're on Instagram?
Yeah, Peter the Director.
Absolutely. I'm at Cliff Bumgardner on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else. As we always say, we love talking to you guys. We love having a dialogue. That's really what this is about, is talking about the things we love and growing together as a community and of filmmakers and of creatives. And that's why we started this. It's why we do it. So please reach out, talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear any topics you have for future episodes, things you'd like for us to discuss in the coming weeks. But until that time, I am Cliff Bumgardner.
And I'm Peter Scheibner, reminding you to craft a story worth hearing.